just the budget overview flyer that is up by, yep, so you have those. So, we're all yours.
So it's been flipping, Brenda, you're actually on the side.
So, I guess my first question, and you know, I'm never sure what the Board of Ed issue, like what the Board of Ed deals with as compared to the rest of the administration. But my first question concern was about the new graduation requirements and specifically the health requirement. Particularly for the current freshmen who weren't informed about the graduation requirements until they'd already started. So some of them weren't able to take it this year because they didn't know about the requirement. And like for my son, for example, he tried to get into nutrition and wellness a second term, but he wasn't able to do that. So since he takes band every year, I think it's going to be really hard for him to fit in this half a year health course. And I was told that there would be online options, but it's been really hard to find those online options. And so I was just wondering, I don't know if it's a board concern, but if there's going to be a plan, particularly maybe for this class, in terms of finding specific online options, maybe even the school offering an online option for the health course, whether during the year or during the summer, so that everybody will be able to take that health course without it conflicting with other things. And I don't know also for the non-freshmen if it's been planned in terms of there are going to be a lot more students taking nutrition and wellness, whether there are more teachers being added. Didn't look like there's increased courses for the health requirements. So that was my first comment.
Yeah, well, I think we'll let Pat address that. The administration really would be the best folks to address that. So, if you wanna,
I can do that.
Thank you.
No problem.
So we do have, the health and the nutrition and wellness class at the high school is new this year. We will be looking to add more courses over time, and we know that actually, as we were talking about the graduation standards changing, and Mr. Leslie did a variety of different types of students, students that maybe take band all the time and all that, how do we make sure that they'll be able to fit those in? And there will certainly be options along the way. As a freshman, they're taking what is required as far as health and PE goes in 9th grade anyhow. And if they could get that extra elective in this year, that's great, but there's lots of kids that aren't gonna be able to do that. They do have the time over the 3 years. We will look at like I said, we do have additional options coming down the road through curriculum and through that department. So there'll be more opportunities, whether they're in class or online, they will be offered for students, and guidance counselors will certainly be able to provide that one-on-one support for any child as they're trying to figure out how to fit in those new requirements.
So that is that kind of like course decision not usually Board of Ed?
So the change in graduation standards was done by the state.
But I meant the courses are.
The courses really would be more of an administrative type of a conversation, and definitely school-based would be the place to go for that if you had concerns. Guidance counselor first, and if you still had questions with the administration.
What year is the new requirements?
It starts for freshmen this year.
How many other courses can you get your health? And I know there's the one that you mentioned, the CERT class also fulfills that requirement.
Right, and some of the ones in the health pathway that right now I'm just totally blanking on it. But some of those also meet that requirement, and we're also, we do provide the whole idea of independent study as another opportunity, as well as, like I said, we'll be looking at some other courses coming through either in school or online, coming through the curriculum process.
was that all your questions?
No.
You want me to
She wanted a break. I had a question. I was wondering with the information that was sent out about the CDC and the coronavirus, do we have a main contact person at the, because one of the things said that you should be looking, checking for updates, with the CSDE,
Connecticut State Department of
yeah,
Education.
do we have a person that's gonna be point person that's gonna be checking that, or is that you?
I am taking the lead with all of the pandemic planning at this point, although I do have a team that is working with me on that. We met today and we meet again on Friday to pull some final plans together. We are getting very regular communication from the State Department of Education, from the local health department, the Chatham Health Department, as well as the state and the federal department. So we are inundated regularly with updates, with supports from a school perspective, just informational. So, and they do have specific point people that we should call, as well as the district does ourselves. We also have the district physician that I actually spoke to today as well.
I know a lot of the teachers have the Purell and sanitizers in their room. Do we have a supply that we give to the teachers or can give?
We have so we have to make sure that we follow all of the guidelines that are for green cleaning, as well as what we can offer in classrooms for any of that. If, I don't know what we provide actually in classrooms. I know we provide in common spaces around, like in the office areas, nurses areas and stuff like that. Would you provide those hand sanitizers? I can get a better understanding at our next meeting as to what we're providing specifically for that in the classroom.
Okay. Yeah, I've been seeing some of the news reports that there's now a run. First it was the mask and now it's the hand sanitizer.
Right.
That's, getting.
And that's not what's being brought forward as a recommendation right now. From
hand washing, but how
hand
kids,
washing,
how
absolutely.
kids are with hand
So again, we're adding signs to bathrooms, we're reminding people of the importance of hand washing. It really is the most important deterrent that you have in order to stem the spread of that.
The two young ladies in the back, do you have any questions to ask us?
No, I just came to listen, really. I do have a question about pay to play. I heard that pay to play is being completely eliminated. I don't know if that's correct or not. But, so, if I understand correctly, pay to play has been around for a while, and then it was increased the past year or two. So I was just wondering why the decision was made to eliminate it, if that's the case.
The board did vote to eliminate pay to play this year. It has been around since 2014. 2004. And it was increased, and board, keep me honest here, I believe, the past 2 years it was
2
increased?
years ago.
2 years ago it was increased, and, the board voted to eliminate it.
So is there a reason it was eliminated completely rather than bringing it down to the level it was at before?
I think that, there's been a budget surplus, the last 2 years, and, we felt like, there was extra costs that parents were coming out of pocket for athletics. And there's obviously a number of schools in the conference that don't charge anything for pay to play. And while we are having, surpluses, some of that surplus money has to go back to the towns. And I know myself personally, I felt like it was, an extra fee, almost like a tax that was going toward revenue, and now being sent back to the towns. But again, that's only my personal opinion.
Did you wanna provide us your
No, I
opinion
was
on it?
just wondering, so there's also, a club fee or activity fee, so everybody who's involved in the club has to pay a fee. Does that go into a different pot? And then for example, my son participates in music and Model UN. He has to pay to go to Model UN conference. various music things he has to pay for. So there's a lot of costs associated with non-sports activities. Does this all come from a different pot of money? I mean, is there a possibility of providing more fund? I know that an individual can ask for financial help if they're not able to pay the fee on an individual, case-by-case basis, but, is there ever consideration of the cost of these other clubs and activities that can be quite substantial, and or does that come from a different money? Is it budgeted differently?
I don't believe it's budgeted differently, I believe it's all part of the revenue that we bring in. The board has not discussed that or brought that up, but I definitely, we're hearing you now, and it's something that we should discuss.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we spend a lot of time more on sports, and it does concern me. My daughter was part of FCS for years. And that they, I think, are often not in the same limelight.
Right.
It would be great to hear from some of those other families as well as you, because that is the case.
Right.
We shouldn't be, excluding one group or saying one group should have to pay and one group shouldn't. And there are a lot of kids who access those clubs, and they should have the same accessibility without having to pay, if that's what we're gonna determine is right for the kids that go to the school.
What else is on your mind?
My one other question was about courses, but I guess you guys don't really deal with the course, deciding what courses are offered and that kind of. It looked like in the minutes you do make some decisions. So, for example, woodworking, whether to eliminate that program. So, how is it decided what the board decides which courses are eliminated and which are kept?
Yeah, the superintendent during the budget season, the superintendent proposes a budget. So she proposed a budget, her and the administration, prepare a budget, propose it to us, and as a board, we decide, yes, this is great, or no, we want woods put back in. So as a board, that's what our role is, that's one of our main functions as a board, is to, adopt a budget. But the administration team brought it to the forefront first, and the majority, I believe it was majority of the board, all of us, I believe, voted, right? Yes, it was all of us that night.
I represent,
You
yeah.
weren't there, okay. The board members that were here that night, we all voted to put the wood program back in.
Now, there were also some courses added this year, like AP Capstone. Is that something you guys vote on, or is that just if it's going to be things eliminated more than added in?
It's part of the proposed budget, so if we pass approve the budget, then it's approved.
There is a program subcommittee that also has the role of reviewing. I'll bring to them new course proposals or new textbooks for them to review, and it is through that subcommittee that it then will find itself into the budget and then coming to the full board through the budget process.
So just one comment about courses, and again, I don't know how much you say now. The course catalog is very large, and I don't know if there's always an understanding that sometimes I think there's a little bit of an illusion of choice in some areas because there's so many courses offered in such a small school, but when it comes down to it, some courses don't end up being offered. I mean, there's courses that are supposedly going to be offered, but if there's not enough students in them, they're not offered. And then there's the issue of schedule conflicts, which may be underappreciated, because I don't think if people are told if students have conflicts except for the guidance counselor, which can be a big issue for some students in terms of conflicts. And so what happens is sometimes I think if there are too many courses offered, is the kids spread out so that even some of the major courses like, you know, history, science, social studies, if you want to be in a certain level, you can't always do that because there aren't enough sections. And when there are more courses offered, the kids are spread out more, so the conflicts come more often. I think it might be helpful to maybe take a look at conflicts and record when they happen, and, you know, think about how just adding courses, because it doesn't seem like courses are dropped very often. I mean, just for example, the inquiry classes, and, you know, 3 inquiry classes were added to the freshman curriculum without, as I understand it, much discussion among the community. So now in those 3 subject areas, science, social studies, and English, instead of there being the levels that were there before, there's also an inquiry level. And so there's fewer, you know, some kids are taking the inquiry, so there's maybe fewer sections of honors. And so the conflicts can more likely arise. Does that make sense?
Pat, did you want to?
I think that we always look at conflicts in the scheduling process at the high school. One of the major causes of conflicts are singleton classes, of which we do often just run one of an AP class or one of an elective class. And if a student really wants that class and that class fills, they might not be able to get into it. We certainly in the process look at where the conflicts are coming from and try to resolve them as best we can through the scheduling process. So we run the schedule several times to see how many of the conflicts we can reduce down to. We do get a percentage number every time we run a schedule. So we might start with what we think is a great schedule for a year, and the conflicts might come back at 60%. We're like, we can't run a schedule with 60% conflicts. So we look at changing and shifting things to try to make that to meet what students are requesting through the course sign-up process as best we can. Some classes only run every other year or every other semester, depending on how we offer them again, so that you're right, the course catalog looks like there's a lot in there, but some of them are only offered at certain time frames to, again, allow some to run 1 year or 1 semester and some to run another, and provide opportunities for students. We can continue to look at if those conflicts are happening, if there are students that aren't getting, in particular, if you're concerned around the impact of inquiry on other classes, I can look more at that.
Yeah, well, for example, my son this year couldn't take the levels of classes he wanted for the major subjects, so he had to change his level of English. I'm not talking about electives, I'm just talking about
And that,
because there are, you know, only so many sections offered.
I would have to look into that more
Yeah.
specifically to try to understand what was causing that.
Right.
But overall, I can tell you, we do look at conflicts and it is something we try to resolve as best we can for students. We will have conflicts every year. We'll never be able to resolve 100% of them. It's just not possible.
To add, that we have heard this concern before, I believe our student reps, our former student reps raised the issue of the AP conflicts that they.
Yeah.
And they will, especially because when you have only singleton classes and you only have 8 periods a day to run them, and you've got there are limits to where we can put the classes and how many teachers can teach them and how we can fill them. So it is a common high school problem that there is no perfect answer to, but again, we try to reduce the conflicts as best we can.
Can I ask a clarifying question based on her question about clubs? Just going back in here, because in here, I know we didn't particularly talk about, like, I know what you're saying, but in here it's saying athletics and clubs.
Yep.
So which clubs are paid for by a parent, and which clubs are paid for by the general fund or the board?
So there's a couple of clubs that we add some additional monies to help support, like with transportation and stuff, and I would want to go back. I know Future Problem Solvers is one of them. I would want to go back in and look at DECA as well, but I don't want to be quoted on that one. There are a couple that we budget for, not many, because they have additional expenses. When we did eliminate the pay for participation, that covered athletics and clubs. Pay for participation was both of those, so that was eliminated in that process, that the board, voted on this year.
I would just,
Oh, so you're saying there's not gonna be any club activity?
There's not gonna be a $40 club activity fee. Pay for participation is what was removed. So, and pay for participation
Oh.
was both of those areas. So,
I don't think that was articulated well enough.
Yeah,
I
I
also
wasn't
brought up,
aware of that.
I also brought
Yes.
up at the last meeting, talking about the education foundation. You see it with the PTA in the elementary schools especially, where they raise funds for the various field trips and stuff like that. And unfortunately, the education foundation for RAM, was ended at the end of last year, so, I personally would like to see it come back. I think there's some good things that the students are doing, and some good trips, and it would be nice to help them,
Right.
with fundraising outside of, what the budget, what we can do with the budget.
and many of those programs do fundraisers, like
Right.
different clubs and
They do.
stuff that do have those more expensive, opportunities.
So Pat, can we get some clarity on what is their responsibility then? And what is paid for play or participation in clubs? Cause like, Mrs. Shapiro, I'm unclear as to what that is, and I can tell
Yeah,
we're not, that didn't come across that way.
So, students in the past, when they were joining a club, well, right now, they pay $40 club fee. There are some clubs that, and that's like for your after-school chess club, your knitting club, the ultimate frisbee, like any of those clubs. There are some clubs that actually do additional types of transportation, participation in, competitions and things like that. Those are depending on the club. Some are, we help to supplement those costs with some of the operating budget, but not fully. And those clubs also do fundraising. I will get back to you as to specifically what are those expensive clubs, and, because different years, they have different opportunities depending on what happens. If they are in a regional competition, they do really well, they might make it to states, or they might make it to a national competition. Doesn't necessarily happen all the time, so again, those types of things vary from year to year depending on specific types of clubs and what they're participating in.
So are those fees waived, you're saying, or just the $40?
No, we're not, just the $40 pay for
Can't go to ski
participation.
club, not going to ski club for free, right?
No, ski club and other types of, well, and that's a different type of club, yes. So those fees still exist, and we have budgeted the same we've budgeted in the past for some of the more expensive clubs. Like I said, future problem solvers, I know that we've put aside, I could call up the high school budget right now and look at it. I know we put aside like transportation money for that one, because they do transport to different types of competitions.
So is it more academic clubs that we're going to, that are added into this? Or, cause like you mentioned, like frisbee, or ski, those are different than FPS or.
Right, so again, some clubs have bigger expenses because of the activity. Ski club, kids pay to go and pay for skiing, where we don't pay for that.
I would like to see a list, I don't know if the board.
I think if it's a question out there and we're now having a question, it's not clear.
So it would be great to see a list of,
Competition clubs, like expensive clubs, clubs that had further expenses outside of the $40 participation fee,
Yes.
like your regular after school clubs.
yes,
And what is currently in the operating budget?
yes.
By not having that $40 fee put in, how's that gonna affect those clubs?
It doesn't know.
Not having transportation would effectively shut something down.
But we're budgeted for transportation.
Yeah. A lot of them, like mathematics club and ultimate, they meet after school, or when they meet, they're not traveling anywhere, there's not really much to.
No,
Well,
those,
Leland does travel.
yep, Milo, UN, future problem solvers, math club, DECA. But again, I don't know which ones,
So I know that those are ones that have additional expenses, but where they actually are funded from and what those costs are, and how much fundraising they do, I would have to get back to. Video production is another one. Thank you. Yep.
That's it for my question.
Any questions?
My last one's leaving the school system this year, so just came to listen, going.
Can I ask a question? Sure. I would just like to know Brenda's last name, when the board voted to take away pay for participating.
You weren't there that night.
I was not there that night, so I just need the date. Brenda?
Shapiro, S-H-A-P-I-R-O.
I believe it's the February. I'm gonna look it up right now.
So wait, we were in heat, so that's process of elimination, right?
So then we can
Because I know we were in heat. Because, yes, so February 3rd. Yeah, and it wasn't there. All right, well, if there's no further questions, we have an executive session to go into, so before we do, any last minute, nothing? Well, thank you for coming. All right, can I make a who's gonna make a motion to go into executive session? Yeah, Jean did. All those in favor? And then we're gonna move to the high school conference